All right, hello everyone. Welcome back. Wednesday live stream. Final live stream this time of this base code print Laravel Cashier completely unnecessary application. I say completely unnecessary because the MVP, the Yagni person in me, this could have just been a Stripe. This could have just been a Stripe checkout direct link, right? There's no reason for me to build an entire application around selling a single product. But as I've said before, it makes for good content. It's related to Laravel. It's fun. So I went ahead and kind of did it the long way around. Again, if you were making an MVP and you were already using something like Stripe, you can just make a direct checkout link in their dashboard. There's nothing special about this product, that needs an application around it. There's no user login or videos to watch or track which video was viewed last and all that. There's no cross-sell or upsells or discounts it's just a one-time limited product. So for those reasons, we don't need this entire application. But again, from a content perspective, it's been fun to build. Today will be the final one. I'm going to focus on testing today. But first, let me catch you up with a few tiny things I did off stream since part 2. So, first of all, if we just take a look at a little git status here, the main thing I did that was pointed out to me after the stream last time, some people were wondering, hey, that little helpers file that you made in Bootstrap, how did that just work? Like, how did that just get auto-loaded because it's in the Laravel app? No, it did not. I did not do this on stream. It kicked out an error afterward, but basically I need to go in, you can see here in the green, I needed to go into auto-load and add explicitly this Bootstrap helpers file, composer dump auto-load. It all worked from then. Some people, excuse me, some people do just throw this underneath app. So if I can digress for a second, or take a tangent for a second, I don't like throwing this underneath app because this is not a class-based file. Technically speaking, again, this is getting very, very strictly technical here. PSR4 is a class loading I guess, principle or practice. It's a standard, right? It's a PHP standard. So 4 is how classes are loaded, how they're namespaced, how they're organized in a file structure, and how all that ties together. This is not class-based code. It's not namespaced code. It's just quote-unquote global code. It's an old-school PHP script. It's just a file, right? So I don't like throwing that underneath app because it really doesn't fit this PSR4 stuff. Does it work? Yes, it works because technically Composer just still goes through and looks through all the files in there and puts them in the auto load. But is it kind of following that standard? No, you're kind of getting lucky. And it's very possible that like Composer 3 someday quits doing that, right? It's very possible. So I don't like muddling it, like, again, from kind of a little purist, a little purist perspective. I don't like doing that. Second, and this is a little more practical, the file, the code that is inside helpers is something that my application needs beyond its classes. Things within parts of the application are going to use these helpers, and as such, they need to be bootstrapped. They need to be loaded with my application. And so again, Bootstrap feels appropriate to put this file in there again because these are global pieces of code. This is more or less kind of library code that all parts of my application, underneath the Composer purview could use. So for those reasons, again, I've always liked throwing it in Bootstrap. So again, bit of a tangent there. You probably, if you were following along or doing this yourself or made a Bootstrap helpers file and did not put this in Composer, you're probably going to get something like, hey, calculate products left, not found, right? You're going to get a function not found. So anyway, that was the main thing I did off stream. Other than that, I really just I think I added like customer email here just to make sure the form, the form data that we're collecting on our form gets passed over to Stripe Checkout. And I think I just kind of cleaned up the name here. It was like thank you, something generic. Now it's order confirm. So that's really all I did. What I want to do now, today, again, everything's pretty much built. We wired all this up with Cashier in the first stream. The second stream, we kind of glued together the front end. And then we really kind of started to focus. Let's look at the front end. But we really started to focus, if we do composer run dev, we really started to focus on kind of this, again, this very narrow piece of the application. So if we go to order create, this little piece here, again, if we're going to go through the trouble of making our own application to do this, I want to geek out on one little piece of this. And here's that little piece, this only 30 left. So again, I have about 30 copies of the printed thing, the printed base code to sell. I'll sign them on the cover or whatever. That's all kind of part of this form, right? But this part is kind of this countdown, and we want to make sure that this functions correctly. And again, while I don't expect crazy demand and multiple people submitting this form at the same time, where like I could have not really a race condition, but I could run out of inventory even though the site allows you to place an order. So again, we're building this Laravel app. Let's geek out on let's go real deep on this one little feature, right? Why not? Because again, otherwise we could just use Stripe Checkout directly. So let's geek out on this feature. That's what we're working on right now. We wrote some of that in part 2, just kind of naively, and we realized, wow, this is kind of more complex than it seems. So let's write some tests to verify the different pieces of complexity there, because I could talk them out as I have been for the last several minutes. That's not very fun. We're developers. Let's look at some code, right? So here we go. Let's get after it. Hey, Alex, how's it going? Thank you for joining. Okay, I still use PHP unit. I'm just an old dog. I'm an old dog, right? Can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? No, I've grown comfortable with the structure of PHP unit, and while I definitely love functional testing or function-based testing, like spec tests, in things like Ruby or something when I was writing that more often, I've been around PHP unit for so long that I'm just, the noise of the skeleton doesn't really bother me. Do I like Pest? Sure. If I were on a team that wrote Pest or wanted to use Pest, I would have no argument. There's nothing wrong with it. Again, just an old school PHP developer here. So let's make an HTTP controllers order controller test. Oh, we already made it. Oh yes. We used Blueprint. For this. Okay, we already have a test. Okay, let's go see what we have. Create displays view. Oh, hey, I'm missing additional assertions. Let's bring those in. Composer, require, --dev, JSON McCreary, Laravel test assertions, ? Oh, nailed it. Okay. I need to call that additional. I have a new Laravel additions package. Part of me feels like I'm just going to assimilate the two of them. I feel like I should just assimilate the two of them. Anyway. Okay, so create displays view. Pretty straightforward. All this was generated. Okay, so store uses form request validation. Okay, cool. Store saves and redirects. Okay, this is where it's going to be. This is where we've added a lot of code where it's not going to be this simple per se. So let's start cleaning this up. Let's see how much of this test actually does run. So vendor bin PHP unit, that I would expect half of this test to run. Okay, so orders create, not defined, orders store. I think it's order, not orders. Yes, it is order, not orders. It's not plural. Either I changed that or that's a little bit of an oversight inside of Blueprint. I'll have to look into that. So order controller test. Okay, so let's fix this. Anywhere we say route orders, Let's just change that to order. All right, we actually have some legit failures now. Let's take a look at these. What's wrong with this? Oh, Vite. Okay, thanks, Vite. This should just be the default in here. Setup, parent setup, that's fine. And then we say this without Vite. Yeah, there you go. There we go. Okay, good. This is what I expect. The store is not going to work because we've completely changed the code, and so we've customized the code in here, and we never went back and fixed the test. So let's bring these up side by side, and let's bring these up side by side, and let's just kind of take a look at the different paths that we need here. That might not be enough room on my lower streaming resolution, so let's not side by side them. Okay, so anytime I'm running a test, and I go over this like super deep in Confident Laravel, which I'm hoping to update towards the end of the year with some of the changes in the testing layer. All the fundamental stuff's still applicable, but it'd be nice to give that course a refresher and take it from, Laravel 6 or whatever it's on to Laravel 12. Again, the testing layer hasn't changed much, but there's definitely some new things that could be covered. Anyway, okay, so the happy path is kind of the first thing. So don't think about all the different exceptions that can happen. Just what's the happy path of like coming in here and going in and going out? Like in the best case scenario, what code runs here? Okay, an order gets created. We don't have to worry about all the cache locking. We shouldn't get redirected. We put some stuff in session and we get redirected to Stripe. That's kind of the happy path, right? Don't worry about all the exceptional state just yet. So let's do exactly what this test says. Store saves and redirects. Okay, so we've got email, fake, signed, Boolean, fine. Option is a word. I don't think we need option, and we don't need Stripe ID. So all we should really be sending across, I think, are these two. This creates valid data, or it should, from what I understand. And then let's query orders. We're going to get rid of those. So we'll run a query to see, give me the orders, make sure that I get just one, right? Make sure I get one of those, and then take the first one. And now we're saying session order ID. What do we really call it? Session put, okay, so it's order underscore ID. I think I changed that. All right, so we are asserting that we got redirected. We're not going to get redirected to index. This is where we changed code. We get redirected to a guest checkout. So let's see here. I think you could say redirect contains. And there's probably, I think for the simplicity, we could probably use like, I don't know what this is. I think it's like checkout. I think it's like checkout.stripe.com or something. Anyway, let's see the test fail. Let's see the test fail. This is closer. So let's hone in on this test and see. Oh, it passed. Okay. Wow, did I nail that? Really? No way. No, come on. That's not right. JMac. I never trust a headshot on a test. Oh crap, it was checkout.stripe. Okay, so let's actually borrow more of the prefix here. Okay. And then one more tiny thing I think I'd want to do is like, I would just say something real simple like this, assert null order Stripe ID. Let's see if this passes. It does. Okay, cool. What we got going on in the chat? Adrian, better than use Soul here. Better than use. Oh. Like here. Like that. And then you could kind of drop. You could drop this. Yes. That is much cleaner. That's much cleaner. We'll do this. This would throw an exception. Okay, well, wait a second. Here's why I maybe wouldn't do Sol here. I would do it in my application for sure, but in test code, and I think Dorinda recently had a tweet kind of talking about this. If I had more than one in the database, okay, I'm gonna get like a weird exception there. I'm gonna get like an eloquent, Sol exception. Whereas with the code I have here, I'm gonna get a, hey, count two, is not equal to one kind of thing, right? That's gonna be like, from a test failure perspective, that's gonna point me a little bit more in the right direction than like an application level exception, right? Meaning an eloquent exception. So yes, could I use Sol there? Absolutely. I think I'd probably keep this code though, just because it is more verbose based on the implementation of Sol. This is effectively kind of what we're doing, but I really want my test failures, and again, Dorinda was kind of talking about this in his tweet, but I really want my test failures to be like super explicit, right? So let's make sure we're still passing. I didn't break anything. Cool. Yeah, Sol absolutely would work. Cool little helper method, but I think I'll leave this for now. Okay, so we have our happy path passing. Let's start to look at kind of the sad paths or the paths that, would fail in kind of the primary action, the paths that don't save the order or redirect back, with sold out and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's a couple paths here. First of all, let's just kind of flag them out here. No products left, right? That would kind of be the next exceptional state. Like I get redirected back with sold out. So we could say something like store redirects back when sold out. Okay? And then the other thing I'd want to do, and we need to read the docs for this just a little bit better, but what happens when this can't acquire a cache lock, right? It blocks for 3 seconds. What happens when this can't acquire a cache lock? So we need to I want to test that as well. So store throws exception when lock cannot be acquired. Okay, so these are kind of the two main ones. This one's pretty techy, but we need the whole reason we're using cache locks here is to ensure that, beyond just our single request, we're making sure that when we're about to perform this query, when we're about to put this order in the database, no one else is doing that either, right? It kind of creates a little bit of a transaction here, not necessarily a database transaction, but a transaction for like that block of code. So this one's a little bit easier. Let's draw this out first. All right, so let's copy our test code. Let's copy this message, and I'm sure PHP Storm might have been able to AI that for me, but whatever. Okay, so we will pass in a valid email. We will pass in valid signed. We're gonna send this across. So now we would effectively assert empty. Or we would assert, we'll assert empty there. And we want to assert that we redirected back effectively. So assert redirect to route. Where we're really going actually is we're really going to order create. And then we'd want to make sure that session has sold out. True. Yeah, okay. And then we'll query the database, make sure no orders got put in for that particular email or user. Now, to get this part to function, so I think instead of redirect back, does back save the input? I think back saves the input. Or do you have to say is back automatic with input? I always forget. Do you have to say with input? I think you have to say with input. I think you do. Okay, redirect back with sold out. This is automatic true, I think. No, it's not. That's flash. Sorry. So with sold out true. And again, we would have got a failure there, but we'll leave it alone for now. Okay, let's bring this back up. Okay. All right, so what we need to do in order for back to work. Oh, is it sold dash out? Yeah. I'm jumping between the test and the code too much. I need to write my test kind of naively in a vacuum. So let's get back to that. Let's set up the test kind of naively in a vacuum. So I think you can say from route. Yep, good. Okay, so we'll come from order create. We'll go to post. We'll plop that in there. Okay, so now I would expect this to fail because we don't have 30 things in the database. Okay, so instead of going to BaseCode print test order create, we went to stripe checkout. Okay, and that's because we don't have enough in the database. So we could put this in like a service class or some kind of facade, and we could fake it out and make sure that returns a number and blah, 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 blah. But the easiest thing to do is effectively just make 30 orders that, you know, we could test this in isolation in another way, more, you know, more strictly, more deeply, more thoroughly. But for now, we could just make order factory 30 where stripe ID is some MD5. Who cares, right? In fact, what do we have in our order factory? Yeah, stripe ID is a word, so we actually should probably get rid of that. We don't even need any of this stuff. Blueprint's generating some old stuff. Okay, let's go back to our test and let's properly set this up. I think what we need to do before we call this is we basically need to say order factory create. Let's do count 30, right? And then we'll do create. Let's make it, you know, just, again, it's a stream. Let's be fun here. So we'll do purchased, right? We'll do purchased. Let's go back to our order factory. Let's make a, oh my goodness, public function, whoops, purchased. This returns static. Return this state, not that. We just need a simple array where the stripe ID is fake MD5. All right. Oh, stripe ID helps. All right, cool. Let's try this. Nailed it. Nailed it. Okay, so that makes sense, right? Like, if you make 30 per, okay, so let's just for fun, let's do 29. That would leave one left over, and we should get redirected to stripe, which we do. Beautiful. Okay, cool. So, yeah, and I mean, it shouldn't matter here, but if we do 35, again, just to play around with it, like, yeah, so let's do right on the money. Okay, I like that nice boundary there, 30-30, you know, that way we're not off by one or something weird. So there we go, this works. So store redirects back when sold out, sold dash out. Okay, all good. Okay, so we've covered this path, and then we get redirected back, right? And it should give us the input. So we could go so far as to say like session missing and blah, 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 but I don't think we need to do that, but we're gonna do it. So let's just say session missing, order ID. I don't like that I have some dashes and some underscores, so let's just fix that. Okay, so null matches true. Again, another kind of poor exception from the framework, but let's fix it. So let's do sold underscore out, and we're back to passing. Okay, now for kind of the interesting one. The interesting one now is when the cache lock cannot be acquired, right? That's kind of the interesting one. So let's see how to do this. Let's see what happens when this actually goes. We probably need to bring up the docs here, but we'll figure it out. I think this throws a timeout exception of some kind. Let's go read the docs. Laravel.com. All right. Let's go to cache. And then, hold on, my chat is in the way. Okay, so atomic locks, here we go. Okay, to utilize this feature, blah, blah, okay, we already saw that last time. Okay, blah, 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 method accepts a closure. Okay, so we've already written it, here we go. Lock timeout exception. If a lock is not available at the moment you request it, you may instruct Laravel to wait for a specified number of seconds. If the lock cannot be acquired within that specified time limit, an exception will be thrown. They wrap it in a, okay, they wrap it in a, yeah, so see, we might need to do this. It's interesting, this release. The above example may be simplified by passing a closure. When a closure is passed, Laravel will attempt to acquire the lock for a specified number of seconds and will automatically release the lock once the closure has been executed. Okay, so maybe because we're using the closure, it doesn't throw the timeout. It just returns null, maybe? Question mark? I don't know. We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Here we go. Okay, so instead of putting in 30, how could we fake, there's no testing here. How could we fake the lock? We could pre-acquire the lock. Yeah, we could pre-acquire the lock for a certain number of seconds and just not do anything or not release it, right? If the lock is not available at the moment you request it, you may instruct Laravel. Okay, so lock get, and I guess don't release it. We just wouldn't release it. Let's try this. This is the way I would do it in my head. So in my head, I would say cache lock. I would acquire the same lock that I do here, placing order. So I would acquire my placing order lock and do it for 10 seconds. And then I would effectively call lock get. And then down here I would lock release after the request. This is a little low level-ish. I'm kind of playing with it, but there's already, I know, a better way to do this, but let's just see if this works, right? Let's see if this works. If I'm holding this lock for 10 seconds and I call my controller instantly and I block for 3 seconds trying to acquire this, that should be more than sufficient that I shouldn't be able to acquire a lock within the application code. Now, again, there's a better way to do this, but let's just see if this works, because that's the way I would kind of naively approach it. There might be a better testing helper method. You can let me know in the chat. I don't think there is, but... Okay, so we're definitely going to block. Okay, and then hopefully this threw the timeout exception. That's what I would want to see. There it is. Lock timeout exception thrown. Perfect. Now again, not the cleanest way to test it, but the result is what we expected. That the lock timeout exception got thrown, right? Okay, let's see what the chat says. Acquire lock test longer than is the code. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Now, the other thing we could do, this is a little interesting, but the other thing we could do is we could actually cache lock this and then do get. So so it becomes self-releasing, we could do get, and then inside of our function, we could effectively do the request, right? I just want to see if this works, because this would probably be the way I would do it. I think if I was really writing this code a lot, or if I had this kind of code in my application more, I think this is the way, whoops, this is the way in which I would do it. I think I need one more. Yeah. So I would acquire the lock with no time limit, but the thing that executed on mine was the request to the application. So then you're guaranteed two things. One, you don't have to worry about any kind of timing that happens, so your test runs as fast as possible, because it's going to release that lock as soon as the request is complete. And to the second point, I don't have to worry about all the get and release and low-level stuff. So let's see if this yields the same result. It should. Yeah, I still get the lock timeout exception. So this is probably what I would do. I would probably pre-acquire the lock during the request that I make in my test, and then just get the response back. Or check Laravel's test base, how they test it. Yeah, again, they might test it. They might test it in a cooler way. I didn't, normally in the docs, you see like testing down here at the bottom. I didn't see that. Now, of course, cache is a facade like anything else, so we could fake it and control it. But I think this is one of those cases where it's pretty easy just to allow it to implement itself. It kind of sucks that it has to wait 3 seconds for my test to complete, but it's okay. Some of the facades you'll find, especially kind of the more, I don't want to say complex, because again, I don't think the cache facade is complex, but there are certain facades, let's just say, that don't have a whole lot of like affordances when it comes to the testing layer. Bus is like a most recent example. It's gotten a lot better in the last, I would say, 2 years. But before that, like, it was really only the big ones: mail, cache, and mail, queues, and events. Like, that was really it. I think a lot of the other facades, there's not a whole lot of ergonomics on like at the testing layer. I'm pretty happy with this code. I'm pretty happy with this test code. Now we need to make this test pass. What we would expect is the same thing. We would expect not sold out, but we now expect something different. So we need to wrap this in a try catch and basically expect like, we don't want to sell them. What could we do here? We got a few minutes on the stream. What could we do here? Let's think about this for a second. Do we want to throw an exception and just tell them to try again? Do we want some kind of fallback where we say, okay, if the calculated amount is like greater than some threshold, then allow the order to be created? Is there some kind of fallback, right? Or do we just kick them back and say, like, try again? Now, as I started out the stream, we're way beyond an MVP of this. So it's hard to turn off that part of my brain. That part of my brain's like, just kick them back and tell them to try again. But again, we're here, we're having fun. We're kind of just making this for content. Let's think about what you could do. You could say, I think I would be comfortable, again, since this is not like some like Taylor Swift concert that's going to be sold out in 4 seconds. I think I'd be comfortable saying, okay, if there was a timeout exception for the lock, then calculate products, okay? Calculate products, and as long as that's greater than 10, then go ahead and allow them to place the order. Because that would mean I would have to have 10 simultaneous millisecond precision requests at a time of people purchasing. Now, in a real world application, is that super practical? Probably not. Probably not. But I think you could do that. I think you could wrap this. You could wrap this in a try, which we want to do either way. So let's just wrap it in a try. We're going to catch that timeout exception, right? For the lock. What was that? What was this called? Lock timeout exception. That helps. So let's catch that. And we basically here is where we would effectively like redirect back, and we'd say something like try again true. Right? So here you go. This is the naive MVP, not MVP since we're way past it, but this is kind of like the naive quick launch it today solution. You wrap this in a try catch. If it has a lock, if you hit the lockout timeout exception, then you're going to go ahead and just redirect them back and tell them to try again. I think the flip side would be, you could, just to pseudocode it out, you could say something like this. You could then go, okay, if calculate products left is greater than some crazy threshold that I feel comfortable with, right, 10, then we could go ahead and make their order and kick them out of this loop. So we probably need to do that in like we probably want to do that in some kind of like separate helper method so we could return a little cleaner. But basically you would allow this to play on, right? So then you could say, then it would kind of be like else, or if it would be calculate. If calculates less than 10, then we'd redirect back. Otherwise, we'd go ahead and do the order and just kind of trust it. So this would be the alternative solution. Again, this is pretty thick, but you get the idea. You get the idea. Do I want to do this? I mean, you're still doing try again either way, right? You're still doing try again either way. So why take the risk, right? Why take the risk of overselling the product? So I think just looking at the code, let's just redirect back to the try again. So that's our implementation. We're going to change this to try again. So now when we run this should work, right? This should pass. Beautiful. There you have it. Okay, does our whole order controller test pass? Now again, some of these are going to be slow because it's waiting for that cache lock. Cool. Okay. There you have it. So not too bad, about 30 minutes to write up, all the tests that we want, but feel much more confident about this now. And it answered some questions about kind of the experience of the checkout, which were not answered before this. So I feel comfortable that this is not allowing, I'm not going to oversell something if somehow there's a mad rush when the quantities get low. If a couple people are trying to order at the same time. Again, I'm not expecting that, but it was fun to build. And we're updating this appropriately and have this nice little counter on the screen, right? So this counter here. So now basically what I need to do is I need to go back and do the slow, non-fun dev stuff, the front-endy work where basically this is like, signed and it's like no signature or, put something fun in there. Their email, buyers now, it's going to kick off to Stripe. And then definitely need to handle some error messaging as far as like all those little flash messages that we said, right? Like, sorry, sold out. You're welcome to try again, in a few minutes. And then same thing on the try again, like, we couldn't verify your order. So basically the same message, just a little bit of information. So just need a little alert message here and then actually fill in the copy, drop in an image. So what we'll do, I don't know. Let me know in the chat. Does it make sense? Should I do a fourth? Should I do a part 4 where we launch? Should I launch it on a live stream? Should we do part 4 where we launch? I don't know. Should I launch it before and then just announce it in the newsletter and Twitter, and we'll do a new content stream next week? Or should next week I totally finalize this with a part 4 where I run a shell script and launch it, and then you can buy it? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the chat. Let me know what you think on Twitter as far as if you think that would be fun or not. So, but I feel pretty good about our cache locking stuff. We just need to reflect all of these redirects back to the front end. But yeah, this is good. Feels good. All right. Well, like I said, let me know if you want to see a part 4 where we launch it, or if you just want the link, and we'll do some new content in next week's stream. So thanks everybody for joining live. See you all either way next week.